I'm John Shrek McPhee, the Sheriff of Baghdad. This is the SOB podcast. And, I always say this, the world is a fucked up place. Every day, the world is getting redefined from what I would say a legal standpoint. So I got a lawyer friend of mine on today, and we're going to talk about the legalities. And I tell you this, and I think most guys that carry a gun know so little about the law and how they can, if you got into a situation, how you could best defend yourself, right? And what I say by that is most gun owners are law-abiding citizen. Otherwise, you couldn't go legally get a gun. But the truth is, because you're a law-abiding citizen, you've never really had run-ins with the law, so you don't kind of know what to do or say. And what I would say with any legal action, and I say this all the time, and you guys heard me say this before, I don't believe there's bad ending, only bad beginning. So my friend today is a lawyer. I'll let him introduce himself, and then we'll get after it. So go ahead. Take it away. Take it away.
How are you, John? It's great to join you today.
Good. Thank you.
I've been practicing attorney for the past 26 years. I've been in both outside counsel roles. Most people would understand, they work for a individual. They're an individual or a company hiring me to defend them in civil actions. And I've represented big companies, smaller companies. I've worked in-house as a in-house counsel advisor to a company, trying to keep it pointing in the right direction, helping the business folks. But I have a very simple philosophy. I hate when bad things happen to good people. So when you told me about this podcast and talking about the issue of self-defense, increasing awareness among your listeners, I was happy to join.
Thanks, man. Yeah. I think everyone I know who carries a gun knows so little about the law. But this goes the same in the Army. Like an average guy in the Army, if he ever got in trouble, right, whether it's in the Army or legally, like, DUI or anything like that, the most guys are straight shooters, and they're just like, well, I dicked that one up. Sorry, guys. And legally, sometimes if you were in some legit trouble, probably not the best thing to do, even though a guy, look, most guys who conceal carry, I believe, have law enforcement friends. You know what I mean? Everybody knows a cop. I can't tell you how many cops I know, and they're all guys just kind of like you. And you could live in a small town and even know the cops, but when they show up, I think this is when the gear should switch to, you are doing everything you can to protect yourself. And if you did that, your law enforcement friends wouldn't think less of you. You know what I mean? And I tell you this is, I've had law enforcement guys, a bunch of them on the show, and I would even say this, and this is going to make some of the law enforcement guys that listen a little bit angry, but most police officers don't fully know the law, right? There's certain laws, like it's simple. Murder, like you shoot somebody, you're standing over the body with the gun in hand. This is pretty simple, but a lot of what we're seeing today with these protests is super gray area stuff. And I think most police officers know the black and white, the 99% of what they do every day. But we're not seeing that anymore. We're not seeing theft. We're not seeing, grand theft. We're not seeing just straight murder. We're seeing kind of good people against kind of good people in fucked up situations. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree. I agree with both of those points. And again, most I know a lot of law enforcement personnel. I know prosecutors, and they don't do cases where self-defense is a prominent issue day in and day out, usually.
Right.
So they're not going to have, an encyclopedic in-depth understanding. But I think that if you conceal carry, I look at it the same way I look at when I prep a witness for deposition. you run through an outline, you give them a sense, you do a dry run of the questions that you think might come up, but you can't anticipate every question. And so I think it's always important to give them the themes, what you're trying to prove, depending upon which side of the case you're on, what your adversary is trying to prove. And I look at the law, self-defense the same way. I think it's important to know what are the key core concepts that are common in every jurisdiction, because every state's different.
Right. Totally agree.
It varies. The law varies from state to state. But there are general themes. And I've mentioned them to you before. I mean, imminence, proportionality, and reasonableness are three of the common themes that you need to establish in every jurisdiction.
Completely agree. I'd also say what most guys also don't understand is you have the right to shut the fuck up and not say a damn word. And you know what I mean? You watch TV and it's like, we got to get a confession out of this guy. You know what I mean? Or it's like, oh, this guy lawyered up. He's super dirty. You know what I mean? And the truth is like, no, you could be innocent and lawyer up as well, right? Or not say anything. And the right to remain silent is the same right that you have to carry a gun. It's the same right you have to free speech. It's the same right you have for any other right that are given to you in the Constitution. And I always feel like guys get that wrong.
Well, yes. And you'd be amazed. Well, two things. One, what you see on TV is not reality. I think that
right.
Probably most people invoke their right to counsel early. They might screw it up. In fact, talking to prosecutor friends, I was amazed to learn just how many different ways people could mess that up. If you say, for example, hey, should I get a lawyer? I think I should get a lawyer. Guess what? If police could continue the interrogation, can I get a lawyer? Cop doesn't have to give you an answer to that. Do I have a right to a lawyer? They don't have to answer any of those. If you say, I want my lawyer, boom, that's the magic statement that should stop the police interrogation. Why is that important? I mean, think about it. I don't have to tell you. After a lethal self-defense encounter, I don't think anybody would be thinking clearly. They might not even say something that's accurate. That's not when you want to be giving statements to the police.
Correct.
Which are going to lock you up into a story. So it's perilous from that point of view. You don't want to be talking to anyone at that particular time. And again, the attorney is going to be a buffer. They're going to, they'll walk you through every single thing that happened. They'll present the statement in the light most favorable to you. And, it'll keep you out of harm's way. So I know people are thinking, it's human nature. Hey, I'm a good person. I didn't do anything wrong. I want to tell my story. Right. You got to resist that. Again, this is general information. It's not meant for legal advice, but I would resist that temptation to lock yourself into a statement that may or may not even be accurate given your state of mind. That's going to be
completely agree.
Again, you're going to have to establish what elements of self-defense that are going to keep your butt out of jail.
Yeah.
That's a careful, methodical process. I'd rather do that and, with the benefit of legal advice after I put some distance. Almost similar to what you say, gain distance. This is another way of gaining distance to protect yourself in the legal arena.
Right. Gain distance, stay calm enough for long enough to make a good decision. I would equate to the right to remain silent. I'd say this too is like a lot of officers that I know when they're in a shooting, right? Your memory is not in a sequential memory of the past. Your memory is maybe on an evolutionary scale, for lack of a better term, is don't touch the stove again. You know what I mean? Like, this could hurt you. Don't do this again. That's really what the memory's for. It's not an accurate representation of the past, right? So, having said that, most police officers I know are coming in the next day. They're watching the video or whatever evidence is out there of what they did, right? And then they're asked to make the statement. So I would say the same for any person. But having said that, look, I'll get into the first question, right? Can or should, can or when should you use deadly force, right? What do you
Yeah.
think
So,
about that?
well, look, I think, again, I like to distill things into simple concepts. So I think that when your life is in danger, the life of a loved one is in danger, and uh, you're protecting some individual from harm, yourself, a loved one, then that's the common scenario when you can use lethal self-defense. I would say generally, property doesn't have the same order of protection as a person. Okay, so generally speaking, unless it's your home or maybe your place of business where there's people inside, you don't have the same right to use deadly force. And what I was saying earlier, John, the key concepts that I think are relevant no matter where you live are you've got to check these boxes to be justified in using self-defense. It's got to be imminent. The threat, that is, has to be imminent. The use of force has to be proportional, and you've got to be reasonable. Okay? Those are the things that I've seen that are common in each and every jurisdiction. The threat has to be about to occur. Can't be, past. It can't be retaliatory, right? Proportionality. That's going to come into play. Hey, was I threatened with a deadly weapon? All right. The degree of force that you use to defend yourself, it's got to be proportional to the threat you're confronted with. And if it's excessive, well, then I think you're going to have a very tough time establishing that you have the right to use self-defense. And it's got to be reasonable. And this reasonable test, not to get all legal on you, is twofold. It's got to be subjective and objective. What that means is you have to believe that you're reasonable, and a person in the same situation as you, the quote reasonable person, would also believe it was reasonable. And it might sound silly to think, well, of course I think it's reasonable, but you know what? If you mouthed off on social media or called your friend and said, I just, wasted somebody and they deserved it, guess what? I don't think you're going to have an easy time proving that you thought the threat was reasonable. If you can tick off those three boxes and, you weren't the aggressor, I would say you put yourself in a good position to establish that you were justified in using, lethal self-defense to either defend yourself or a loved one.
Man, I would agree with all of that. I think I always tell guys, and I know you've heard this before, right? Is I always tell guys what you have to ask yourself before you draw your gun is this a death sentence for this other person? Now, what do I mean by that? Okay, you're in a gas station, the gas station's being robbed. Is this guy robbing a gas station in front of you a death sentence? Right? Okay, next scenario is you're in the gas station and the guy came in and, I don't know, pistol whipped someone's child and is about to do the same to the mother. Okay, is this a death sentence? Or, the extreme is he comes in, he's wasting everyone in the store. Luckily, you're just left. Okay, is this a death sentence, right? And the reason I say that is because, and then, is this a death sentence? And is someone's family, children being harmed. Yours, someone else, doesn't matter. If the answer to those is yes, you're probably going to end up being just fine. You know what I mean? Now, we see these days with the riots and protesters, we see some very low level criminal activity happening in front of you by criminals itself, right? Generally the protesters, targeted opportunity, they want to get free shit, they're out burning shit. You know what I mean? Fuck, if I was a teenager, I'd be out protesting right now. Like, we could burn down a car dealership. Like, dude, that
Yeah.
sounds like a good time. I'm just saying. I'm just saying, right? But so I think a lot of these rioters, looters, protesters, whatever you want to call them, I think they're just kind of low level criminals looking for targets of opportunity, right? So you're getting a low level criminal in a quasi low level criminal situation, and then you're going to start blasting people. This is obviously the bigger crime. You know what I mean? So I always say, is this a death sentence for the other person? And then, yeah, like you said, uh, gain distance, right? Stay calm enough for long enough to make that better decision, right? I always say those things. Now, proportionality, right? Your proportionality is this a death sentence, right? And I think we're really saying the same there, right? Imminence, right? I kind of don't address imminence in what I tell people, only for the fact is I'm always telling guys, keep backing up, keep trying to get away, right? Because, you know, especially with Kyle Rittenhouse, there's times in the videos where he was the aggressor, right? And then he ends up running away, so now he's not the aggressor anymore. The truth is as I'm telling people to always back up, right? It leaves you to be what you call the reasonableness, right? Is someone's got to believe that you weren't the aggressor, right? So I think in what I say, although probably a lot more watered down than the way you described it, I think I think there's a lot of what I tell people without having any type of law background in exactly what you said.
I couldn't agree with you more, John, and it's common sense. And I told you this before. I think if I were to give a primer, which I'm not, going to give a legal lecture necessarily, but to me, this stuff falls in the knowledge, column of SOB tactical. I mean,
Totally.
This is understanding a little bit about what the law is in your state, what rights you have. I think it's very important for anyone who's, can still carry or, has a gun in their home and may find themselves having to use it. So it comes down to common sense oftentimes. But, the example that you mentioned, the Kyle Rittenhouse example, something else you mentioned that I agree with, this is going to be, I believe, a law school fact pattern for years to come, because he used his weapon against 3 different individuals, and he's going to have to establish that he was justified in each and every case. So it's like a mini trial for each person. Boom, the first guy chasing him, he was cornered by a group of protesters. He was in fear of his life. He turned. He saw a gunshot off to his left. He wasn't sure if, who was armed. This guy threw I think there's bad facts and good facts. I mean, the bad fact is, I think he threw a plastic bag at him. So if you just isolated that fact, right, the proportionality test, that would be an unhelpful fact. But the counter is that, there were people with weapons all around. Someone, I think, discharged his weapon in existence. Yeah. He was cornered. So I think that's what he's going to argue, his defense team, to kind of counter that. The next dude that he faced was a guy who tried to hit him, again, with a skateboard. So if all I told you was, hey, this guy was assaulted with a skateboard and he was shot by someone with an AR, I don't know, what would you say? Maybe
Yeah.
that
Sounds
would be it.
sounds sketchy. Sounds
Sounds
sketchy.
sketchy. However, he was on the ground, and if you look at the
Yeah.
way he struck him, it was with the corner of the
Yeah.
skateboard. I mean, it really
Yeah.
could have been fatal.
Yeah.
So
The
again,
skateboard could be a deadly weapon.
yeah, so again, that's fact pattern number two, and then the last one I think is maybe the the most or at least the strongest case of self defense was someone had a fire, had someone had a handgun and he shot that person. But I think he's going to have to walk through and do this analysis for each and every time, he fired on someone. It's going to be a case worth watching. I think it's a defendable case, but it's not going to be an easy case.
Oh,
Good
it ain't
that,
going to be easy.
good that they've been able to raise $2 million. They've done a lot of creative and controversial things in that case. They put out an 11-minute video, they being, I think,
Yeah.
the team or someone allied to the defense team to kind of
Yes.
the case to raise funds, and they've raised about $2 million. But that's going to be a situation where he's going to have to establish all of those elements and the innocence, because the law is not going to protect you if you're the aggressor, generally speaking.
Right.
So what does that? Don't start the fight. And if if you can avoid it. Now, again, it's, I always say, for every rule, there's an exception. So even if you started the fight and it was a non-lethal fight, you can regain your innocence, as they say, if you stop fighting, withdraw, make sure everyone knows you withdrew. And if that guy in turn pulls out a weapon or a bat or something, then, hey, you might have started the altercation, slapped someone, punched someone. You didn't really want it to escalate, but the other person escalated. If you can communicate it and convince everybody, all the witnesses that were around, that, hey, you were willing to withdraw, you backed off, but you were left with no other choice. Even if you started that fight, it's possible, I believe, that, you might be able to successfully argue self-defense. But again, the way to succeed is to eliminate issues, put yourself in the best position, to avoid this. Again, equating it to your gaining distance, to try and put yourself in the best position possible. And when you, when it's all mixed up and you've got a lot of issues, there's just a lot of hurdles to jump through. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think Kyle's going to walk. I think he's going to get out, but like you said, I don't think it's going to be easy. And look, we talked about this before. Pull the trigger, ruin 5 years of your life. He may not be in court for 5 years, but this is going to be his fucking life for the next 5 years, whether he likes it or not. That's a lot of stress for a young kid. Where's he going to get a job? You going to hire Kyle Rittenhouse? You think Walmart's going to hire him? I think he's got a long road ahead of him, but I think he's going to walk. And look, I'll tell you, I'm going to tell you something I never told anybody. When I was a kid, I went to school in South Chicago, and I used to have to fight every day. Every day I had to fight, right? And that's just how it was. A lot of times when, whether I was the aggressor or I was just defending myself, a lot of times if I was going to win a fight, meaning I could take a guy and it goes to the ground and I'm going to get on top and pound him, a lot of times the entire time we were fighting, I would yell, "Stop hitting me."
Yeah.
And then when we had a police counselor, which was this big Italian guy, and he was like an on-duty cop, but he worked at the high school to break up fights. When he would come and he'd ask everybody what happened, they would all say, he was yelling, "Stop hitting me," the whole time. Now, after about 5 or 6 times of that, he caught on to me really quick. But the reality is I think there's some things you could do or say in these situations to turn the crowd on your side that might help you later. Now, this isn't for everybody. And if you're trying to defend your family or anything like that, I wouldn't even be thinking any of that. But as a high school kid who, had a stupid fights, I used to yell, "Stop hitting me" all the time. And then when questioned, all people remembered was I was yelling, "Stop hitting me."
Well, I think once again, your legal insights were present even decades ago in high school. Plus,
Well,
I,
I I grew up in an area that was a lot of people needed legal.
no, you were smart to say that. But again, those are, what are the witnesses going to say? What are they
Right,
going to say they saw?
right,
This is why I also like, in terms of the defensive posture, your hands up when you're gaining distance. I think someone across the room, if they see someone, hey, look, back off with your hands up, I'm going to say, hey, that person's not the aggressor. Guess what?
right.
He was trying to calm that guy down. And so I think that's something that's
Yeah,
useful, uh, useful, you know, fact.
yeah, yeah.
I
Well,
think, whenever people start talking, um, what I would say about that is I suspect that you would be very disciplined in a situation, to say my life was in danger, or, I'm being attacked or something like that. And, I don't know how many people, if we did a survey, would be as disciplined in a real self defense. So, uh, if but again, anything that establishes innocence, anything that eliminates you as the aggressor, I think is a plus.
yeah, I agree. Okay, so you talk about, you said, imminence, proportionality, reasonableness, right?
Yep.
What are some other things to consider?
Again, the concept, those are the big three. I would say the three and a half point is the concept of innocence. That's the other core concept that I see in every jurisdiction, because there's no justification for physical force if you're the aggressor, and that's where I would say you're really in peril if you're wound up, or you're perceived to be the aggressor. And people always seem to ask the next follow up question, or I would say the most common question that I get asked when I tell people that is, well, can you strike first? That's do you have to wait for someone to squeeze off a round before you shoot? And what I would say, in based upon what I've read and what I've done, you don't need to let an attacker strike first, so long as you can establish the attack was about to happen, right? Which makes sense if you think about it. But again, if you do strike first, you better be prepared, because you'll need a clear explanation on why you had to. I mean, that's something that's going to be scrutinized, right? It's if and again, to me, I think it's there's different degrees, right? I mean, obviously, if someone pulls out their weapon and is in full presentation and you fire first, all right, I think most people would probably agree you were justified. If the weapon is still in their holster, I think that you might have a tougher time with that argument. So again, it's really based on the situation, but these are things that I think are worthwhile to think about. Just as I said, I don't put someone in a deposition where they're grilled for 7.5 hours if they don't understand what we're trying to prove and what the other side's trying to prove. And I think the same dynamic is here. What you're trying to show is that you acted reasonably, that you used proportionate force, and that the threat was imminent, and it was about to occur. And so if if you have that knowledge, I think that'll hopefully better inform, and you do a little bit of homework, and checking with you know checking with your whether it's your law enforcement friends or your local, shooting association, or even on the internet, checking what some of the statutes are, so that you have an informed, knowledge of what the law is, because it varies from state.
Yeah, I think like okay, guy is obviously you're in a bad situation. Guy's obviously the bad guy. His gun's still in the holster and you shoot. I agree with you. Like I would say bad for you in the sense that it was just probably premature. Hey, gun is in his hand. He's holding the gun, even if it's at his waist or, he's whatever, right? I think he'd probably be better, right?
Right.
Better. And,
Exactly.
or he's aiming it at someone else. He's aiming the gun at someone else. I think you would be fine there. But I would say when you said like gun still in the holster, I was thinking a little premature. You know what I mean? Like, um,
Exactly. But this goes to your point that you hammer home about gaining distance,
totally.
and giving yourself time to make the right call.
Right.
And again, all I'm doing is trying to add a little bit of knowledge, and maybe encourage people to dig a little deeper to get a more in-depth understanding for, the when and where they might be justified. But again, going back to that point you made, as I used to joke that, if you, in litigation, sometimes even when you win, you still lose because it costs so goddamn much and it takes so long that you wish you never even started it. And the same, I think, can be said, for the self-defense scenario. I mean, look, I look at it as, a last resort, I mean,
Right.
because no one wants to put themselves in the situation and deal with the aftermath, because you said 5 years. I think that's exactly right. First of all, I mean, take Kyle Rittenhouse. I think he's got 5 murder charges and 1 weapons charge, if I'm not mistaken. That's some pretty heavy stuff to deal with for a young man. And, he's got a great legal team. And I don't disagree that it's a very defendable case. I wouldn't be surprised if they're successful. But that is going to be some heavy duty stuff to deal with for the next, year or two. Put that aside. He could be facing civil cases for wrongful death or, and by the families of the people who died, by the individual who was wounded, and that could lead to a monetary judgment that he might have to live with, for the next 20 years. So again, that goes to the point of this is really something that you gotta think long and hard about, and also, not take lightly, because you could be justified. Yeah. You could do everything right and still be in a heap of trouble and headaches in the aftermath.
Yeah.
And I look at it, if I need to do it to, save myself, save a loved one, then that's the primary. The rest is secondary. Right. But if it's a gray area and that is not necessary, it's not a clear case for that. Why would I put myself through that, if it wasn't absolutely necessary? That's my analysis for myself.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like, is my family or someone else's family being harmed? Yes or no? And by harmed, I mean about to die. You know what I mean? Not just getting pushed around or shoved to the ground or whatever, right? Yeah, it's interesting to me, the Kyle Rittenhouse thing, because, well, first and foremost, I'm going on the record to say he's going to walk all charges, only because I think he was overcharged in general. But I also think he was overcharged, and he was he was overcharged too quickly by one of these left-leaning prosecutors that, with better charging for Kyle Rittenhouse, he might have could have been fucked. But the emotional side took over, and he's overcharged. I mean, he's even charged for reckless endangerment of a fucking cameraman who's a reporter that followed the guy to the initial shot. Like, it's seriously, we're recklessly endangering the news here. Like, this is, if you're going to do, and then, like, no one else is charged. The guy who shot previously down the street somewhere, well, he wasn't charged. And, why aren't you charging the reporters for not stopping, arson or looting, whatever? So I think he's going to walk on all charges, but, it's going to be a long road for him. And look, we're just talking about the legal system. We're not even talking about any type of civil action that might come his way, which is going to come his way. But the truth is like, look, if you have nothing to lose, the civil court can't do shit to you. If you have shit to lose, you're going to fucking pay. That's just how it works, right? So, yeah, we haven't even talked about civil court, and I agree with you, man. So, okay, so having said that, like, we're talking about deadly force, right? One of the things that, and I know we've talked about this before, but one of the questions I would ask you is about, well, a couple things. First is arson, but the next is frozen water bottles.
Hmm.
In Chicago, they threw 4 frozen water bottles, right? By the time it goes into evidence, well, it's just a bottle of water. You know what I mean? However, a frozen water bottle fucking injured 49 police officers in Chicago. So, what about in response to arson or attempted arson or even frozen water, right? Like, what do you think?
Well, here's what I think about arson. There are some states where you can use deadly force to prevent the commission of a crime. That's not necessarily take kidnapping, for example, or arson. But it's really dependent on the state. The thing I think about when I think about arson is, again, property is not afforded the same level of protection as a person. So again, if it's some auto dealer that a band of looters are torching, this is based upon what my understanding and what I think. I don't think that would justify deadly force to because you're talking about property. You're talking about, burning cars, and hey, they might be causing millions of dollars of damages, but the law doesn't accord the same level of protection to property as it does a person. So if it's, there may be states where, hey, there's a statute on the books. Someone's committing arson. You can use deadly force to repel it. Just like you can use deadly force if someone, enters your home, the castle doctrine. It's accorded that same level of protection. But it really depends. In fact, I looked. I don't think it's on the books in North Carolina, but I think South Carolina has it as arson as one of the violent crimes that would be included as a justification for deadly force. So I think that's one of those issues where you're straying on the further away from the sort of safe, harbor of where self-defense is intended to be used. And I mean, this is, a frozen water bottle. That's a tough one. I mean, I think it's a tough one because I don't think there's a clear answer. I'll be honest with you. I hate it when attorneys don't give a clear answer, but I don't think there's a clear answer because I think an argument can be made that it's a deadly weapon, and I think an argument can be made that it's not quite doesn't have the lethality of other weapons. So I can see that issue going either way.
I'll tell you this. I'll bash someone's fucking head in with a frozen water bottle. This is what you know.
Yeah.
You know what I
But
mean?
I'm
Like, I
just
think
saying,
it's clever.
yeah, it is clever. And you wonder if people who are using him precisely for that reason, because
Totally
hey,
agree.
maximum impact, but hey, go ahead, make the case against me that, so I think that, that's just one of those, gosh, that's, a little bit of a gray issue. I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end, but I don't know whether I'd use, deadly force to repel it. Let's put it that way.
I look at the water bottle this way, right? Gain distance, stay calm enough for long enough. Are other people being hurt, right? Like, if it's one guy with one water bottle that's frozen coming at me, you know what I mean? Try to do a little
Well,
shucking and jiving so he
yeah,
doesn't bash your head in.
yeah,
But if it's 100 people with water bottles,
yeah,
way different ball game here, right? Because
yeah.
then there's a bigger intent.
Or if it's somebody, with a full mount smashing someone in the face with a water bottle,
Right.
that could be another
Right.
issue.
Yeah, totally agree, right? But yeah, the water bottle stuff, I wanted to ask you that, right? Same with the fire. I mean, think about this. Someone's got a Mazel Tov cocktail, right? Okay, there's no dollar amount. Like, what if that Mazel Tov cocktail cost $1 million in damage? That's not deadly force. What if it cost $10 million in damage? That's not deadly force. What if it cost $1 billion in damage? You could save $1 billion in damage. That's not deadly force, right? And then my next question would be, could I shoot the Mazel Tov cocktail?
Well, you might be able to. I don't know that anyone else could.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair, right? But what if I shot the fire device itself?
Well, again, I think that, uh, there's there's very few people that could, that could work for. But, that's where, I have to tell you, I see, again, this is based on my, uh, you know, reading books and Boney, I see a clear distinction between property and
Right.
person. So again, I don't know that there are violent crimes that are so bad that would justify self-defense in certain,
Right. Totally.
states. That's my understanding. But I don't think that there's a monetary limit on, hey, if you're causing over a certain amount of damage, go ahead, unleash, the round. I don't think it works that way. But to me, let's take that example you gave, because that's an interesting one. So say someone is about to throw something, whether it's a water bottle or something heavy, and you're there, you see a lot of people getting gravely injured, and you shoot the device out of their hand. Amazing, right? I still think you get into some trouble about that. You could
I
be,
guarantee it. I
you could be,
guarantee it.
I think it's a defendable case. I think you'd raise a lot of money in your defense. I would contribute, but I think you'd succeed, but I think you'd still get in a whole mess of trouble for doing that.
Yeah. Okay, let me
Especially,
ask you this. The device, shooting it out of their hand. They come to your house. They're in your yard or on the street in front of your house, about to throw fire, some type of Mazda cocktail at your house, and you destroy that device by shooting it from your home. Right? There's no argument. Like, think about this. They were about to burn down your home. That's everything you have. That's the people you love. You know what I mean? You don't think that would fall under the reasonableness?
well, uh, you know, I'll answer like an attorney from a legal point of view. Each state, construes the castle doctrine a little bit differently. I live in a state that has a very narrow view. what happens inside the four walls of my house is protected. My front yard, if I have a detached garage or a shed, it's not afforded the same level of protection as inside my home. I thought about this when I heard you talking about how to deal with looters, from a vantage point, and not giving them anything to see. But the situation that you mentioned, if no one got injured, and you were able to successfully, diffuse the situation, then I think the likelihood is you'd emerge in a better, unscathed. Because
Right.
here's the thing that I learned. I asked a couple of prosecutor friends of mine, just because I was curious, give me the most important fact that goes into your decision whether to charge someone in a self-defense situation. And you know what they said? The severity of the injuries. That's what they told me. Both, I spoke to two, they both said the same. So obviously, if no one gets hurt, you still might get into trouble. But I don't think you're going to have the weight of, the massive, prosecutor's office and coming at you as with as much force as if you, shot someone.
Right.
And same situation and someone died. I think that, again, this is where it pays to know something about the law where you live, because, your home is highly defensible property, but what's the definition of your home? And believe it or not, it changes depending on where you are. I kid you not. I might not be able to use lethal force if I see someone menacing me in my front yard, but if they come through the door, you bet. And some states are different. Some states are different. That goes to the, stand your ground versus duty to retreat.
Right.
I happen to live in a duty to retreat state. However, the castle doctrine is still observed, so I can use deadly force to defend intruders against my home. However, my home is probably going to be construed as the four walls, of my house.
The inside four walls, maybe not the outside.
Exactly. So I don't think I get the same level of protection, right, and I'm justified in using deadly force if I shoot someone before they enter. And that's just a fact that I need to, grapple with. But it depends where you live. And this is where I would say it pays to do, a little bit of homework, because what is your dwelling? And that's better to know that before you're forced to confront that situation, because you might handle yourself differently, right?
Well, if you knew the legal definition of your home, it might give you the clear answer you need of what to do, how to do it, right? Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Okay, so someone's got this Mazel Tov cocktail or frozen water bottle, and I put a bullet through their hand. This is less bad for me than just dropping them in general.
I would say, based upon the anecdotal conversations I've had with prosecutors, I would say yes.
Okay, let me ask you this, because I've been thinking about this lately, and don't laugh. What about a bow and arrow? What if I just took a training arrow, someone raises up the Mazel Tov cocktail, and I put the arrow and it injures their hand, arrow injures their hand. You think that's as bad as a gun?
Yes.
You do?
Only because I think that it would probably be construed as a deadly weapon. I think I'm not sure that the difference in weapon. I think if the weapon is capable of killing someone, and again, if we were taking this as a hypothetical and somebody was an expert marksman with a bow and arrow, I think that would be perceived as deadly as someone who's an expert marksman with a gun.
Wow. I was thinking you'd get a little more leniency using a bow and arrow than you would a gun because it's just not a gun.
I'm not sure you would, only because I think you'd have to argue. Well, I mean, again, you can make the argument that it's less lethal, but I'm not sure that that's an argument that you want to hang your hat on.
I'm just saying. I've been thinking about going back, dusting out my bow. You know what I mean? And if someone comes, I bow them down, and that way there's no noise or nothing there. You know what I mean? And then I don't know where that arrow came from. That's not mine. Yeah, your fingerprints on that thing?
I just want to make sure you got the part about this being general advice and recommendations or legal advice at the beginning of this.
This is not legal advice, just to be honest. Okay. All right. So, yeah, I mean, no, but that's an interesting point, right? The protesters are going to, burn down your house. Man, like, do you shoot the device? Do you not shoot the device? Do you shoot the person? Do you and this is, look, if you would have told me in 2014, how long have I known you? 2015 I met you, probably?
At least, yeah.
If you'd have told me in 2015, like, we need to be training against looters, we need to be wearing gas masks and having pepper spray in our car so your family's not stuck on the highway. If you would have told me shit like this, I'd have been like, you're a fucking whack job. Right? Like, seriously. But here we are 5 years later in 2020. Oh, by the way, on the dawn of an election, you know what I mean? Which it ain't going to get any better after if it goes how I think it's going to go, which I'm not going to say how I think it's going to go, but I don't think it's going to get any better anytime soon. So the fact of the matter is like, here we are talking about this and we're laughing about it, but the reality is like, these are very real situations that could happen. You know what I mean? Now, they're not happening to 1 million people a day, but this could definitely happen.
I definitely agree that this is the new normal. Again, I like to think about, I often tell people in my day job that I deal with, in probabilities, not possibilities. So I'm always thinking about what are likely scenarios, not what are possible, right? So you want to spend your time and effort dealing with what the most probable scenarios are. At least that's the way I think. I think this is the new normal. I think what you're seeing, every day there seems to be a new incident that is another, manifestation of this new normal, whether it's protesters, people confronting the police in ways that I've never seen, the level of aggression. So I agree with you. This, and I certainly wasn't on my radar when we met, and took my 2 days. Of course, nope. And I bet you it wasn't on anyone's radar. But this is the new, the new normal. And I think, again, to me, just as, people ought to be training, people ought to be, gaining as much knowledge. I think, again, thinking about protecting yourself after a confrontation is also important. So that, that's something, that it pays to put in some thought, in a lot of these situations, because, hey, it happened anywhere, literally.
Right.
And this is this type of unrest is occurring across the country. I mean, there are probably areas that are, spared and fare better, but I venture to say everyone, can jump in their car and go, without too much driving somewhere where there's been some unrest or some trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. So when can you when can you use deadly force to protect, to stop people from looting? You know what I mean? Like, we've been talking, they bring Mazel Tov cocktail, water bottles, right? We've been talking about the bow and arrow, which I'm thinking. And
Yeah.
and it's not as crazy as you think because there's no noise, but whatever, whatever. Uh, so, when can you use deadly force to stop looting, or can you?
Well, you see, to me, again, I think you're uh, moving into an area where it's you're not on as firm a ground. I look at the Kyle Rittenhouse case as an interesting example of it because I think he was putting himself uh, in harm's way to a degree to stop looting. But I think his case is going to come down to whether his life, uh, you know, was in jeopardy. And it's going to be more of a traditional self-defense. It's not going to be a case where, hey, he was, protecting, some business or some property. So, I really think, that, when you're, if it's property, and not someone's, life in jeopardy, I don't see it. I don't see it as a justification again, unless there's a specific state statute, which, gives the same level of protection, to prevent arson or some other violent crime. You can use deadly force. I don't see the same level of protection. I'm sorry to say. I mean, in some
Yeah.
degree, it's a little bit counterintuitive. I mean, it almost doesn't make sense. Hey, I got to sit there and watch these, protesters burn down some, warehouse or building or destroy property. I can't do a goddamn thing. I mean, from my point of view, I don't know that that's a recipe for use of deadly force unless someone's life is in jeopardy.
This is the end of part one, the legal brief of the SOB podcast. Stand by for part two.